Welcome to the Empowering Industry Podcast, a production from Empowering Pumps and Equipment as the voice of the pump and related equipment industry. Hey, everybody, and welcome to episode 128 of the Empowering Industry Podcast. I'm your host, Charlie Matthews, and I'm so happy that you choose us every week. Make sure that you do us a favor and rate us, give us a positive review. You can also subscribe to the podcast. That way, it will show up in your feed every week. So every Monday, you'll hear from us. Stay connected with us at Empowering Pumps or using that hashtag Empowering Industry Podcast. So I have to say that I'm so happy. It's August and it's Innovation Month. So it's really, I guess, Happy Innovators Month. But it really does remind me of Hillary Johnson, who created and designed her own pump. And so I'm really curious about how she's doing. So I want to give her a shout out here. We did a podcast with her where she kind of went through the pump that she designed. And I just think it's really neat how our innovators just throw everything on its head and come in with something completely new and innovative. So I love seeing that. So happy Innovators Month, everybody. Y'all look for that hashtag and see, what is being created out there. One other thing I just wanted to mention, I hope you all enjoyed the Reliable Plant bonus episode that we did. I had such a great time there. It was, just getting to know those even more people within the maintenance and reliability space that I just really enjoyed it. I enjoyed, being there with my family. So if you haven't had a chance, go back and look at our bonus episode that we just did last week. And so I want to thank the Reliable Plant and Noria, that group, for bringing, such a diverse community together. And I just think that we can come together and collaborate and innovate and just bring that energy together. So really excited about that and happy to share it with y'all. One other thing really exciting is my children are going back to school this week. And so I have a middle schooler, I have a freshman, and I have a high schooler. And so it's about to get real for me. And, they're all grown up and that stuff. But that does allow me to travel again. August is one of my favorite times of year for planning and getting ready for the next year. But then we can, go back to traveling. So we call it traveling. The travel season has started. And I just wanted to, just before we move on, before I hit the road and going, I guess, we do have our virtual leadership summit coming up. And I'm really excited about that. I have some of my favorites that are coming to the table to share about leadership. We have, leadership discussion panel with Rob Kalwarowski and Susan Hobson. They are my coaches, and I absolutely love their style. So I know that you will. We're also going to have a panel discussing, leading in manufacturing during these challenging times. We're going to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion and how to, get that going. Let's create some action around that, some action plans. And we are going to talk about personal and career growth, leading change, lessons learned through conversations with water CEOs. And then we're going to have a panel about women in industry. I want to talk with several women that are being advocates that are out there doing it. So just so much to be able to offer you with that leadership summit. So definitely check that out. I'll put the link in the show notes and get involved. You can come, you can ask questions, and really just the whole month of August, we do focus on leadership. And I'd love to hear from you, what's your leadership style? What have you learned as a leader? And what are those challenges out there that we have right now? And that what are the opportunities for the future? So join us then in August, the 23rd, I believe. I'm just going to double check that right now. Yes, that's right. So it's August the 23rd will be our leadership summit. Okay, so That's not all. We have so many different things to celebrate as far as activity and events, and when we can, get everybody together. Epic, if you haven't heard about it, it's the Empowering Pumps and Industry Conference that's going to take place in Pasadena, Texas, at the San Jacinto College. So excited about that, bringing the workforce and industry together so that we can talk and we can really collaborate and energize each other and kind of get excited about the pump industry again. So I'm encouraged. I am excited to be working with San Jacinto College. They are their entire team is amazing and just passionate, and the facility is amazing. So if you haven't seen the pictures yet, please take a look at empoweringindustry.com and you can see how you can get involved there. We are accepting award nominations this month. We are going to be giving away special awards at the end of Epic, and you can get involved. One of the things that you can do is nominate an industry person of the week. And of course, we'll include all of these links in the show notes, but just nominating an industry person of the week does put them in the running for that industry person of the year. And we'll be able to give that away during Epic and make a big deal in several other categories as well. So I encourage you to go to that website, check it out. How can you get involved? How can you be with the pump industry in November? I think that's all I want to talk about today. There's so many other things. I know we've got so many different travel trade shows coming up starting in September. And so we will dive into that next week. But I want to just jump into the interview. John Donatello, he is a leader in our space, and he's a senior vice president of business development at Hydro, a director and advisor. And I think he really has done that his entire career. And he has so much experience in running companies and helping, with these highly engineered systems. And so, any type of critical business around engineered systems, it takes that knowledge and takes that expertise in multiple markets and industry segments. I mean, I think one of the things that I really love about his background is, all of the P&Ls that he has been able to take care of. There's some pretty high numbers that he's been working with, and just his expertise overall with the systems and the pump industry. You're going to love this interview because he is one of those legacy guys in our industry that is not going away. He has retired, but he has come back to serve. And I just think that is remarkable. And I just thank him for that and his mentorship that he gives, not just in the pump industry, but around his community as well. So thank you, John. Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for taking a selfie with me that time at the Hydraulic Institute. He's like, do we have to? Yes, please. And he did. So thank you, John, for being a part of this and for being on this podcast. So without further delay, here's your interview. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Empowering Industry Podcast. I'm your host, Charlie Matthews, and I have a really special guest that many of you probably know. But John, let's start with bringing you in and kind of just introduce yourself, tell people who you are and what you do.
Well, hi there, Charlie. My name is John Donatello, and I've been in the pump industry working for several companies over the last 4 decades. I have done most jobs in companies from sales to operations to management and leadership, and it's been a very fulfilling career.
Yes. And, I'm always curious how people get into the pump industry, for example. Is there any kind of, it's been a while. So do you still remember what brought you to the pump industry?
I do. It was 1980 or 81, if I'm honest, totally here. And I had out of school working with a group of engineers. I'm an engineer by degree, and we had gone our separate ways, as most young people do, as they try to find that balance of challenges in their career. And I got a call from a friend of mine whom I had met the first job out of school. and he said, "Hey, if you're free tomorrow," he said, "I'd like to take you on a call with me." And we were in Chicago at the time, living in Chicago, and I was working at the time on in a northern suburb, and he was out west, working out west, west of Chicago, west of the airport, and said, "Well, meet me here." Long story short, he took me to a power plant, and we met and donned our hard hats and just walked into the plant, which you could do those days, into the boiler room. And he said, you know, it was very noisy, very dirty, as you would expect. And he said, "You see that thing over there?" And he was pointing to this machine, rotating equipment, as it were. He said, "That's a boiler feed pump." And he said, "I work for this company and we repair those things." And I thought, wow, this is pretty cool. You know, being in a power plant at that time, it was a Commonwealth Edison plant in southwest suburb of Chicago, one of their coal fire plants. And after the call, we went and spoke to some of the maintenance crew then, and got to learn a little bit about what he was doing. And he said, "You know, we really have room for a salesman." He said, "Do you think you'd be interested?" And that was really my humble beginning. So I started out in this industry working for Byron Jackson, which at the time was part of Borg Warner, their industrial products group on the pump side. And so I became an aftermarket repair salesman back then. Or, you know, at that point in time, we were sort of frowned upon because new equipment was, you know, all the thing, and you know, we were referred to as wear ring salesmen. So that was my humble beginning. I remember it well.
Yeah. So anytime that we can get into a plant, that just changes our life. I know it does mine, and really just being able to see that equipment working, and just the workforce being able to interact with equipment, I think is so important, or the potential workforce, because it energizes you, and it really just opens your eyes to the things that we've never seen before, right? That really gets us going. Well, so that's wonderful. Now, so you kind of answered my next question, because I know you from the oil and gas industry, but you also were in power. Any other kind of industries, or was that focus from power to oil and gas pretty quickly?
Well, I think for me specifically, being in the Midwest early in my career was a benefit because there's such a diversity of industry. So I would say early on, it really was, although primarily focused on power, both fossil and nuclear, there was also strong influence on oil and gas because of the refineries in that area. And in fact, not limited, because you had strong steel component in that industry, and a lot of general industry. So you really had a really nice mix there to get involved with. And as you know, in the pump industry, any process plant is going to have centrifugal pumps in it. So, you know, when you're in the aftermarket and trying to focus on improving reliability, and efficiencies, it's all fair game. And so, although most of my time was focused on energy, which included the power gen as well as oil and gas, it certainly wasn't limited to that.
Yeah, and I'm curious. Just, you've been in the industry and seen it grow up. We'll say, but recently, with the changes in the pandemic that has been caused, just really over the last couple years, have you seen any type of shift that's worth noting here in the pump industry itself?
Well, that is a truly open-ended question, and you know, the answer is a resounding yes. And if you think about just what's changed in the last even less than 12 months. I mean, we could start in no particular order, but you know, the Russia invasion of Ukraine and what the domino effect has been in disrupting supply chains, that in and of itself, and the uncertainty from, you know, the political tensions abroad, when we look at it from a global perspective, and how that's weighted investment and weighted in a negative way, I think. And you know, even the third thing I'd say is, even as earlier as this year, is a resurgence of COVID, especially in localized areas, China in particular, which further exacerbates supply chain. Now, in spite of those headwinds, there's been resilience on the tailwind side. I mean, for example, last year in 2021, if we talk about pump industry in general from a global perspective, I mean, we saw growth of 9.8, almost 10%. And this year in 2022, with even in the midst of all that, we're going to see growth almost 12%. And if you try to localize it and look at the domestic market here in the U.S., which is about 25% of the total market globally, it's even higher. It's 12, 13, 14% last year versus this year. So there's a lot of great things have been happening, which puts things into context, I believe. And so while, if we're looking forward now into the next 6 months, I do believe that there will be some softening on the demand side, but I don't think we're necessarily headed into a recession anytime soon here. And a lot of this, when we talk about our industry, pumps in particular, has been pent up demand. And I think this double-edged sword, this dichotomy between net zero greenhouse gas and climate control versus the growth and interaction of fossil fuels in general. And the reality, Charlie, of this, as you well know, is if you consider oil, gas, and if you consider coal and throw in nuclear, when you look at the scale here, it makes up still 87, 88% of the total capability of how we produce, how the world produces energy. And the reality is it's going to grow. It's going to continue to grow. Now that, doesn't preclude the fact that clean energy, solar and wind is not growing. It's growing dramatically, 20, 25% or more year on year, but it's coming from a much smaller base. So it's going to take a long time to catch up. In the meantime, we're going to see growth in coal, for example, on a global scale, mostly as a result of growth in emerging markets, specifically China, India, Africa, these sorts of places. So I think that has created this tension between what politicians are talking about in terms of climate change and doing the right things in terms of the future of the world, but still trying to balance and in a measured way, in a thoughtful way, things that could very well happen even later this year in terms of brownouts, blackouts, these kinds of things here in this country alone.
Yeah, I remember talking with someone who said, that energy sources don't really go away. Like we're still using them. We just use them in different dimensions, I guess, or different. I'm trying to think of the word right now. Basically, we may use a lot more coal this year, but we're growing in the renewables area. So it will balance out and continue to grow in other ways of getting energy while not abandoning our old ways. And I think that that's smart. I mean, I just got back from a trip to Africa, and to think, even just to get them water, some of the routes that you would take into a village wouldn't even allow for a traditional truck with a skid to get up there and to be able to create that. And so I just think that that's really something to think about, is where they are, where are those markets, and how can you fulfill their needs in that place. So great insight there, John, of just where we're going. One thing that you did just make me think about, is with the blackouts and everything, is, what does keep us up at night? Like for me, I do want to see a more focus on sustainability and where we can go and improve. I'm always kind of part of that in continuous improvement process. But what keeps you up at night, John?
Well, for me personally, and this is not new necessarily. I mean, when I was still working full time at John Crane, it was a big issue back then. But it's really the health and well being of employees. With me now, obviously, it's at Hydro, but remember, we've asked people to do and to engage in new and different ways, mostly as a result of COVID. and to deliver at a faster pace, and have redefined in many cases what job profiles are, and what success looks like. So, what I would say is the pandemic has taken a significant toll on people in terms of their physical, their emotional, and their mental health. And the unique thing is everybody has their own story, and I think that's really what's important here. And so, when we to do more, ask people to do more and more, and we keep raising the bar. This is all about customers. It's all about meeting or exceeding customer expectations. So active engagement with employees is absolutely critical. So, what keeps me up at night is talent, and the search for talent, because in our industry we're all searching and seeking from that same talent pool, whether you're an OEM or an independent, or whether you're an end user or you're in the EPC trades. That talent pool is shrinking, and we're all fighting for that same talent. And so for me, that talent is a source of competitive advantage. And so when I think about talent, I'm thinking about, how do we differentiate ourselves in attracting and developing and engaging, inspiring, and even more importantly, retaining the employees that we have as a competitive advantage.
Yeah, for sure. I was just talking with Alex Chavrosky, and we were talking about the job market and the hiring process. But really, it's attracting that talent and keeping them there. That's the main focus. And it really is about knowing what their needs are. How do they fit within your organization? And so more about the uh, applicant. Now they really have the power, and they're searching for the organization that fits with their job plan and their needs. And so I think it is a challenge, and I think that we have to be conscious of it. So I'm glad to hear that you are, and I already knew that you have that mindset. I think I talked to you at the Hydraulic Institute, and we were coming off the like I guess it was a year ago, basically, and the the amount of travel that reduced for people during the pandemic, and then to see, okay, how much did we really need to be on the road? Like that was part of that conversation. I feel like that we still have to work, but making better decisions just based on travel itself. And I guess we have a little bit better tools now, or at least we know that that is out there. The tools may have been there before, but we have used the tools and feel more comfortable with, having virtual conversations versus traveling to a place. You still feel that way? Are you? Because I know it's shifted. I know that I felt the demand for and the push to get back out there too.
Well, I would answer it this way. You're absolutely right. COVID forced us to position ourselves differently, to get creative and innovative in terms of accomplishing our work. So managing and dealing from afar has become more of a norm. At the same time, it became, as you know, difficult to travel because of quarantines, and because of local policies, which even in the U.S. differed state to state. And so, whereas in my previous role, I traveled 100% of the time. Every week I was somewhere in the world. Now I have no appetite to travel internationally anymore. However, domestically is still within reason. So my view is nothing from a customer perspective. Nothing uh, can replace that face-to-face interaction. Where can press the flesh, so to speak. However, you can be really, really efficient in having virtual meetings. I believe, and it forces you almost to be efficient and be productive, to have an agenda, to keep time and accurate notes to engage people. So it's sort of the new norm. And in fact, when back to the talent side of this, uh, talent is thinking, that's certainly part of the narrative. It's part of the dialogue. Well, can I work from home? And I've created this workspace, and the ability to do some of the things personally. And in actual fact, people I find this true of myself anyway, work more hours from home than they did, the travel piece aside, than you would if you had to go in an office every day for the most part.
Yes, and we have to balance that too. But you also kind of retired. So I want to put that you retired, but then you kind of came back on a consultant basis, and you are now working for Hydro. So I love this dynamic because I see it over and over again, especially with our industry experts like yourself. We don't want you to leave the industry yet, and so just tell us a little bit about that transition, and then kind of what you're doing there at Hydro and where it's going.
Sure, happy to do that. Well, I had planned to phase out uh, my last job at John Crane. COVID just accelerated it a little bit because I felt that it was better for me to go, even if it resulted in someone saving a job. So part of my goal, objective in retirement was to sit on a couple of boards, and so I sit on a nonprofit here in the town where I live in South Central Indiana in Bloomington. I also have an affiliation with the Kelly School of Business here at IU. And my relationship with George Harris goes back to the mid '80s. So we had been friends for a long time, and we had been talking about a board seat with Hydro. And so when it came time for me to retire, he said, "Hey, I've got that board seat for you now." And so I jumped on that, and I thought this would be perfect for me in retirement. Well, one thing led to another, and as George would do, well, would you like to do a project? Well, yeah, okay, fine, I do a project, and then, I've got a problem with one of my businesses. Can you take a look at it and give me your thoughts? And well, why don't you lived in the Middle East? Why don't you help us with our business in the Middle East? So one thing kind of led to another, and before you know it, here I am. And although I try to manage my time so that I do have, back to the work-life balance, so that I have some time in retirement, that I'm pretty fully engaged in some of the businesses of Hydro globally, as well as business development, as well as mentoring. For me, that's a big part of it as well. Is some of the high potential and people in the organization that will be the future of Hydro in perpetuity are have my interest as well.
And we know that it's a great loss for our industry to lose George as well. And just I couldn't go without saying that it's a tough conversation, so I won't go into it. But I just we have a deep respect for him and your friendship, and so I know that he would be happy seeing you there and engaged in the business. And so, do you see a change in Hydro? I mean, definitely the talent has always been a part of their focus and retaining talent. I know that personally. And then, for the future, I haven't been to Hydro's facility in a while, but it's one of the most impressive out there with the test stand and everything. I guess, what do you see next for Hydro?
Well, I would start by saying no one will ever replace George Harris as a visionary and as a leader in what he has accomplished with this business. But I will say that we're trying to change the narrative from what we do to why we do what we do, which I think then tells a more compelling story. And so if you think about what Hydro does, first cost savings that usually are a result, and I'm talking about new equipment now, for aggressive competitive purchasing efforts, really in the big scheme of things, are inconsequential when compared to the annual pump related operating cost savings. And so taking a total solutions approach to minimizing maintenance and operating costs is really where we're at. So the largest cost drivers being maintenance errors, unexpected equipment failure, reduced operating or mean time between repair, and what we call parasitic energy costs. So recognizing the emphasis shift in the market to reduce costs to remain competitive, Hydro has developed extensive programs that provide solutions in all of these areas. And so as Hydro's evolved from being what arguably is the largest independent pump repair and service organization to an aftermarket total solutions provider, I think is really key. And more specifically, Hydro's invested in the products and services, in the processes and technology, and more importantly, in the talent that's focused on our customers' annual pump related cost of operations, and then at the same time helping them increase their revenues. So, as being the largest independent pump service company, we provide an unbiased view to support customers' initiatives, specifically for increased profitability. And as that independent service provider, not being an OEM, it positions us in a way that our goals are completely aligned with those of our customers. And so that's really the essence of the business model, if you want to think about it, as to where we're going.
Yeah. And I think it's so important to note that because it is about fulfilling those customer needs and really how are we going to do this in the best way. So I love thinking about that as like, we all have like an agenda for, what we're trying to accomplish. And that kind of takes out the fact of the new business or new products part of that. Okay. So you'd mentioned mentoring earlier, and I'm just curious. You're mentoring within Hydro, but and your community. Do you seek out people? Do people kind of seek out you? How does that work? And then if somebody wanted to, be mentored by John, how does that work?
Well, yes. I mean, some of the people are people that I've sort of hand selected, but not necessarily based only on my own input. So input through others in the organization, but it's not limited to that. I still am involved with people who call me from John Crane, from Weir, from Flowserve, people that I've known in the industry and work with in the industry. So as you know, staying engaged in industry groups like HI, for example, is a good one. That network continues to broaden, and so you see key people, key leadership at these meetings, and continue to engage in them. So uh, I think it's a matter of people that have worked in the industry, people who have sought me out, and then equally people that I feel are those that need to be mentored so that they can take, in the case of Hydro, to the next level.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad to have you in the industry still. Like I said, just a wonderful to see you out at these networking events, and to know that you're willing to help our next generation learn, and not kind of leave those knowledge. That knowledge gap is so scary sometimes to think about. But thank you for that. Is there anything else, just like as we've been talking, that you want to make sure that our listeners know?
Well, I think things are changing. I think there's been more change in the last years, as that we've alluded to in this call, that you can reflect on, and I think things will continue to change. So when I look ahead, or as I look ahead in terms of trends and improvements, there are really two or three things that stand out to me. And one, we've talked about the talent piece of this. The second piece, I think, which to me is going to change the landscape significantly and already has, is digitization. I think that digitization, from our perspective, is taking a more holistic view of the system in and of itself, and really changing that narrative to becoming interconnected. And so, while in the past we might have been looking at, what do we do to solve a pump problem, now we're looking at it more holistically in terms of how do we solve a system problem. And so it requires more expertise. In the case of Hydro here, we have a platform to do root cause failure analysis. We've got the engineering expertise. We can provide the actual execution of the upgrade or the re-rate or the remanufacture. We have a test facility where we can demonstrate performance We can instrument the equipment, we can install the equipment, and we can monitor the equipment over time and provide reliability services. So this is, if you think about all of the products and service as a portfolio that we have, it's moves up the value chain, and I think digitization is what ties it all together. And as the industry moves from being predictive to prescriptive at the other end of things and control, I think this is where it's headed. And for me, that's the future.
Thank you, John. Okay, so I'm not going to let you go before we do a little rapid fire. I didn't prepare you for this, but basically, I wanted to ask you, what your favorite book is.
I actually like biographies. I'm reading right now one on Eisenhower, and so when you think back in the 50s, the mid 50s, and so there's so many parallels between what's happening today, mostly in politics, but not necessarily limited to politics, because you've got world, is on the back of World War II and what happened. So there's historically so much to learn, and I find it fascinating. Growing up in school, I wasn't necessarily a big fan of history or geography, more so the exact arts of math and science. But now I find it extremely interesting. So that, and obviously books on leadership and management. But right now, a good biography has my attention.
Yeah, and we can learn so much from history. You're right, and other people's stories. I agree. So, next thing, favorite song.
I'm a fixture of the '60s. I'm a rock guy. Anything from that. When I turn on the radio, when I drive to the airport, I'm listening to '50s and '60s type music. So
Okay.
obviously, I have some favorite groups, but usually anything in that era is interesting to me.
Okay. And then, what advice would you give people coming into the industry?
My advice would be to listen and ask questions. There's no silly or stupid questions. The only silly or stupid question is the one that goes unasked. And so you can learn so much. Be open-minded, and and listen and learn.
And I'll close with just, what is the best advice that you have ever received?
The best advice I ever received was during a performance review many years ago. And while I was one that was always looking for what I could learn more, I really boil it down to a couple of things. And what this my supervisor at the time, my boss at the time, said, you have to be a little bit more patient and understanding of those who aren't quite as motivated or as driven or as passionate as you are. And that really sat well with me. And when I do touch points and reviews today and mentoring today, I keep that in mind. And that was one of the central things that in my career was meaningful for me, was that not everybody's wired the same way I am, and so you need to be you need to be understanding, you need to be thoughtful, and you need to be caring.
Yeah, such a great set of advice for all of us. I know I've heard that and tried to understand that myself. I don't know that I'm there yet, but I'm still trying to work on it. We're all different, and we all have different gifts, and appreciating that. So, John, thank you so much for your time today. I know people can find you on LinkedIn if they want to touch base with you, and we'll put that in our show notes. But it was just a pleasure getting to spend time with you and getting to know you a little bit better, and look forward to seeing you at one of these industry events in the future.
Well, thank you very much. It's been an honor and privilege for me, and I look forward to seeing you in the fall.
And this brings us to the end of the show. Thanks for listening, everybody. Do us a favor and give us a rating and review for the podcast. And don't forget to mention us at Empowering Pumps, or use that hashtag Empowering Industry Podcast. We'll find you. And until next time, be empowering. See you later, everybody. Thank you.